Okay. The topic here is rabbinic authority in the digital age. So I think it's important to define the terms a little bit. I'm not talking about any sort of doctrine of rabbinic authority. I'm talking about the fact of rabbinic authority. That is, the decisions and the rulings of rabbis have an impact on the material world. The architecture of a synagogue, or the sale of a particular food item, or even, rabbinic authority extends to the bedroom as well. So I'm talking about the authority that rabbinic decision making has over the real lives of people and community. At the same time, I want to contrast rabbinic authority with rabbinic power. Rabbinic power is not something that's today probably less than ever, at least in the United States, and depending on who the rabbi is in Israel too. Rabbis classically didn't have armies, they don't have guns. There was no formal hierarchy. Whatever hierarchy there was emerged spontaneously. The Posek Hador was not elected. You have, Jacob Katz does a little synopsis of the, of what the structure of rabbinic authority was in the medieval and early modern period. קיימת באין היררכיה של פוסקי הלכה, אף כי אין מבנה שלה מדורג ומוכר על פי סימני עמדה או רמת משרה קבועים ועומדים. Right? There is no formal rabbinic hierarchy, and yet rabbinic authority is accumulated in a way that produces hierarchy. The question then is, how is rabbinic authority accumulated? How is rabbinic authority constructed? So Rav Moshe Feinstein, the great posek of American Orthodoxy in the 20th century, answered this quite simply when he was asked the question for the New York Times in 1975. People saw that one answer is good and another answer is good, so gradually it'll be accepted. Seems so simple. But it begs the question, what makes an answer good? And this is where the virtuosity of a posek comes in. There is no single answer. Obviously, massive erudition is a major ingredient, but there are a host of other ingredients: the powers of persuasion, the projection of authority, appeals to morality, appeals to tradition, rhetoric. One of my favorite rhetorical modes is what I call Moshe Feinstein's fake right, go left, where he begins his discourse by sort of affirming the machmir impulse, affirming the stringent impulse, and then by the end of the responsum, he'll actually rule leniently. So it's a rhetorical device by which he's actually constructing authority, meaning he's showing his allegiance. He's almost validating the questioner's impulse, but at the same time he's reluctantly and rhetorically reluctantly ruling leniently. The construction of rabbinic authority is a topic that deserves a lot more study, and well, it's actually something that I'm studying, so we'll see how that goes. So the question here is, what happens when somebody masters the game, when somebody learns, when somebody accumulates authority, only to discover that the rules have changed? Yesterday, and I apologize to my co-panelists who don't have any sports genes, Tim Duncan retired yesterday. And amongst the discussions of the greatness of Tim Duncan, one of the greatest basketball players ever, was that the game changed, the game evolved both organically, and the rules of the game changed, specifically the rules of how one can play defense changed during his career. And he kept adapting and he kept changing his game to meet with those rules. Is there a rabbinic equivalent, right? Can rabbis shift midstream to adapt to a new model of rabbinic authority? We just heard Shai talk about certain epochal technological shifts, oral to written, and then written to printed, now printed to digital. In the case of oral to written, authority was derived, and here's what I mean by the structure of rabbinic authority. the appeal to authority. Authority is derived from an unbroken chain, or from the projection that you are part of an unbroken chain that extends from you all the way back to Moshe, and it's a personal chain. I got it from my mentor got it from his mentor, all the way back. Mastery of the written word does not and cannot confer that type of authority. But with the dispersal of Jews across North Africa, the direct encounter with the master becomes all but impossible. So there's a shift towards the written word. The most famous expression of the anxiety that this produces is the letters of Pirkei ben Baboy, one of the a student of the Gaonic yeshivot in Babylon. In his polemics, which he asserts the primacy of the Bavli, but along with his assertion of the primacy of the Bavli, he's asserting the primacy of oral transmission, of oral texts, over written transmission. Ultimately, and here we have a quote, and he talks about the mastery of Rabbi Yehuda Gaon, right? That he never said anything. Shalosh amanu pi Rabbo, second line. Shalamdo Rabbo, halacha l'maaseh, al pi halacha l'Moshe miSinai, v'nitztava al maaseh, v'naaseh shehen halacha l'Moshe miSinai, shekach katuv, ra'ei l'mati atchem chukim u'mishpatim kasher tzivani Hashem, Elokai lo b'chtav, elo ba'al pen. Okay? He's making a direct appeal based on orality. When people are starting to gain information from written texts, it's a direct threat to this sort of authority. And these polemics are themselves a result of the erosion of that authority. And I would say even that the more direct the appeal to authority, the greater the indication that the rules are changing, right? When he's saying you have to listen to us because we are the ones that have the direct tradition from Moses, that means that there's competition. Okay. The advent of printing, similarly, right? It meant that the personalized, handwritten, barely decipherable compendia like Sha'arei Dura were replaced by uniform, stable texts that are more easily mastered. So this too undermined the very structure of rabbinic authority in that it obviated the need for traditional forms of mastery. Once I have the Shulchan Aruch, once I have the Darkei Moshe, the Torah Chata, I don't need the Sha'arei Dura anymore. And the rabbis of the generation of the Shulchan Aruch were quite suspicious of that erosion of their authority. The best, that's not its context, but the greatest line is by Rabbi Yehuda di Modena, where he reports a conversation that he had with an Am Haaretz, in the third line, Acharei, Ad she'acharei hatasat sefer Shulchan Aruch, Sham'u oznai me'am haaretz. I heard an Am Haaretz saying, Ahuvai, some of my best friends are Am Haaretzim, Shehaya Omer, Kisheyesh li Shulchan Aruch tachat atzilei zra'otai, Einam tzarich l'shum echad mikem harabanim. I don't need you rabbis. I got the Shulchan Aruch. Right? So here it's a direct erosion from an Am Haaretz. You couldn't have constructed it better. An Am Haaretz saying, hey, I don't need you rabbis anymore. So in sum, the changes in the primary information technology have produced anxiety amongst the old guardians of knowledge, who correctly, it should be noted, perceive these technologies as dangerous to their authority. In each case, however, the leading rabbis did find new ways to construct and project their mastery and their authority. So over the past few decades, we've seen how digital text has replaced printed text. So I think that the eulogies for paper books are premature, but the changes in the culture of rabbinic learning have been dramatic. With massive databases like Varlam Responsa Project, HebrewBooks.com, Otzar HaChachma, and others, which grant instant access to texts that are easily searched and excerpted, a Torah scholar with reasonable familiarity with the rabbinic corpus can accomplish what could only have been accomplished by the greatest sages a generation ago. So this has produced certain anxieties amongst the new old guardians of knowledge, who sense that the structure that supports their authority is being undermined. The most acute example of this, I believe, is the case of Rav Hershel Schachter from Yeshiva University, from Reitz. The basis for his authority, right, his appeal to authority, more than almost anyone else, is his massive erudition. He knows an incredible amount, and even his teaching style, the style of what he calls yidios, he's trying to organize this unsurpassed knowledge of the halachic corpus, an incredible recall, and transmit it pre-digested to his students. But it's precisely those aspects of rabbinic authority that can be mirrored by means of digital repositories. And so we have, as we saw with the earlier shifts, we find that he's begun to make direct appeals to authority. Right? This is a responsive that he wrote on women in tefillin, and you see the anxiety is jumping off the page. Chadashim karov ba'u, inhigu hanacha mechudeshet. We'll skip to the fifth to last line. בפרט בזמננו שאת הכל אפשר לחפש ולמצוא באינטרנט, באוצר החוכמה, בפרויקט השו"ת של בר אילן ובדומה, וכל אחד יכול לעשות את עצמו כתלמיד חכם וכמורה הוראה ופוסק, אף בשאלות חמורות, כאילו יודע מעצמו את כל המקורות ואת כל השיטות בסיוע כל הנ"ל. And then he adds a little bit of snark, אשר על זה ביארו על דרך הלצה בכוונת הירושלמי, in דמאי, שעם הארץ אימת שבת עליו, and עם הארץ is afraid of Shabbat. Why? Because on Shabbat, שאינו יכול להשתמש במחשב שלו, מפחד הוא שיתפסוהו ויראו ויבינו שבאמת אינו יודע. Right? He's afraid of Shabbat because somebody's going to ask him a question on Shabbat, and he's going to be saying, I don't have access to my Bar Ilan CD today, I can't answer your question. And this is actually a recurring theme in his writings and speeches. And the interesting thing is that he's far from a traditionalist. He actually believes that there's a great deal of room for chidush, even in the halachic realm. However, he maintains quite clearly that the right to paskin is concentrated in the hands of the very few. One can imagine that in an earlier generation, there would have been no need to make this claim explicitly. The hierarchy was implicit. There was no need to, the hierarchy it was, as we saw with the Katz quote, the hierarchy was spontaneous. Today, because of these emerging technologies, the hierarchy, on one hand, it can be flattened, and here you see an attempt to reassert the hierarchy, that not just anyone can answer certain questions. And here he's saying that even if one can locate an answer by conducting a database research or by querying Rabbi Google, it's insufficient. You still have to ask the questions. I want to point out that his rhetoric is, right, so it should be obvious by now, his rhetoric is symptomatic of a shift in the way that rabbinic authority is constructed, and that he's very much aware of that shift and deems it dangerous. Earlier shifts have taught us that there's no going back, meaning once the printing press was invented, as much as the Maharshal and the brother of the Maharal wanted to protest these new technologies and the new types of codes that were coming out, as a result of these technologies, there was no going back. Digital databases, instant access are here to stay, and they're going to continue to be incorporated into the study of halacha. At the same time, it's reasonable to assume that the new technologies will not spell the end of rabbinic authority. So the question is, how might rabbinic authority be constructed in the future when it's easy to second guess or to find alternatives to any given psak? I'll refer here briefly to the shoot SMS, which was discussed in the previous panel, and point out that what I would call oracular psak, right? I don't need reasons, I don't need explanations. It's like asking the Urim V'Tumim, right? I'm just getting a pat answer. All of the authorities of the shoot SMS accumulated their rabbinic authority at the outset of the digital age or prior to the digital age, right? And they're still using the authority that was accumulated then. They adapted to the new technology, but they're still using that authority. What I do think, and with this we'll conclude, I think we're going to start to see a move toward psak as policy, right? That poskim that are going to be dealing with larger issues are going to start writing tshuvot that are more akin to policy papers. It's not new that poskim use ideological arguments either explicitly or implicitly, or use close reading, or a close reading of a responsum can show a good deal about a postate's overall vision. But it's very rare to find a postate that attempts to situate his rulings within a broader vision of halachic values, halachic meaning, what a halachic civilization is supposed to look like. There are several contemporary halachists from the last century that do this. I'm going to just single out one. Rabbi Eliezer Melamed. He doesn't write tshuvot. He's writing a code called Ninei Halacha. It's 15 volumes and counting, and it's extraordinarily popular. And his method of organization is that he provides an ideological or values-based framework into which he assimilates the given set of laws, and then he proceeds from there to the practical details. The individual rulings are assimilated into a larger teleological framework. And it's in this model, the task of the posek is not only to convince audiences that there's ample textual evidence for his particular ruling, but that the way that he is ruling fits into a broader halachic framework and system.